Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We've got a good number signed in, a few more still joining, but I think we'll make a start and let them join as and when they can. So first of all, my name's Jon Harrison. I'm one of the senior solution architects here at Idera, and I work with our ERStudio product range. So I'll be presenting the webinar today, and I'll explain what we're going to cover in just a moment. So just some general logistics. We are using GoToWebinar for our hosting software. This is a live webinar, so that does mean we're happy to take questions. Everyone will be on mute, so if you can just enter them into the GoToWebinar question box. We'll take a look at those as we go along. I do have possibly one or two of my colleagues logged in also, and they'll probably just keep an eye on the questions and try and get answers back to you as we go along. I did upload a copy of the presentation and the slides in PDF format, so that should be available under the resource tab. So feel free to download those as a takeaway. And of course, we will be recording the session, so you will be sent a link afterwards with the recording and how to access it. Right at the end, I will pop up a QR code and a web URL, so if you have got further questions or you want to ask us anything more specific, then you'll have the right links and the right details to be able to do that. Okay, let's head into our agenda here. So I think before I go through the agenda points, this webinar, really the idea came about because I talk to a lot of our customers using ERStudio, and I do a lot of demonstrations and presentations, and it becomes apparent that even some of our users who have had the software for quite some time aren't always aware of some of the things that ERStudio provides, just in terms of general productivity, but also working with specific technologies as well. So I'll start off just by doing a really quick overview of ERStudio and kind of the approach to modeling that it takes. We'll then do some more specific things. So we'll take a look at the actual user interface itself. It might not sound very exciting, but there's lots of really cool little features hidden away in there that you can use to help you navigate around your models. And the format will be, I'll cover just a couple of points in the slides, and then we'll spend most of the time in demonstrations. So we'll hop in and out between the slides and demo for each topic. One of the main things I do really like in ERStudio is the way that it works with JSON. And this is definitely one of those things that a lot of people kind of think, oh, ERStudio, an ER modeling tool, yeah, it does databases and SQL code. Our dev team actually put a lot of work in a couple of versions back to enable us to have a really strong support for JSON, as that was a requirement that was coming up more and more. And also because it's used by some of the NoSQL databases as well, like MongoDB. So it gives us a way of working with those. So I'll talk a little bit about how we can reverse engineer things that might have JSON embedded within them. And we'll, again, do a little demo of that. And we'll then demonstrate JSON physical modeling. And again, I think this is a really, really nice implementation that we have in ERStudio. Taking that really forward to the next stage, once we have our models and we're looking to generate something from them, whether that's SQL code or JSON code, one of the things we've added recently is the ability to integrate directly to Git to be able to do that. So again, we'll talk about the configuration needed and how that can be set up. And finally, we'll probably just take a very quick look at how we can also publish the contents of the models out to ERStudio team server. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end as well for any additional questions that people think of. So at the top right of the slide there's kind of a little kind of overall aim really. In essence, what we're trying to achieve with this is to help you kind of think about how, rather than just taking what ERStudio provides you out of the box and kind of following its mandated menus and the way it structures things. Let's take a little look at how we can kind of customize some of those, how we can even automate some tasks and get a more optimized workflow to make us more productive. Okay, so I'll do this part fairly quickly, as it's just really an overview on ERStudio itself, which I suspect several of you are familiar with. ERStudio is made up of several components. The one we're going to spend most of our time in today is on the left, which is the ERStudio Data Architect. This is the modeling tool itself, and that is a Windows application. It's a rich GUI environment for working with the models. And you can see on the screen now we can do logical, physical, we can support conceptual modeling, reverse engineering, generation of code, and so on. So all the good things you'd expect. Other components of ERStudio consist of a repository to do things like sharing of models in a team environment, and also version control of the models themselves. I'm not really going to talk about that today. And the final component on the right is what we call the Team Server Core component, or the Team Server component. And this actually allows us to take the data models and publish them out to a web portal and a web browser interface. So again, in terms of productivity and being able to share information, that can be a real kind of saving point using that technology to extend it out to a wider audience. And I think the final box I'm just going to show on this one is we can also, there's ERStudio, as well as working with things like relational databases, NoSQL databases, we'd also have some really powerful integrations into some of the tool sets. So if organizations are using things like Calibra, Microsoft Purview for their business glossaries and managing of business terms, ERStudio can also integrate into those and pull them in and map them up to the data models as well. Now, if you look at what ERStudio allows us to work with in terms of data models, ERStudio doesn't really dictate that you have to do things in a specific way. There's obviously some kind of constructs and some things that are built into the product in how it's designed. But if we look at the slide here at the bottom of the diagram, we've got kind of representations for multiple logical and physical models. So these would typically be different data assets or different data sources in the organization. The physical model will be quite a direct representation in most cases of tables and columns or JSON files. The logical model is a bit more abstract. And in fact, in ERStudio, the physical model is where we'd specify anything that's related to the platform. So this is for SQL Server, this is for Snowflake, this is for JSON. The logical model is abstracted away from that level of detail. It's kind of independent of the platform we're working with. If you're doing work on a particular project, this kind of setup may be really what you're working on day to day. But more and more, what we're also finding is a lot of organizations like to have this concept of an enterprise logical model. We could talk literally for hours on this and how this can be structured and so on. I'm not going to do that today, but the enterprise logical model with ERStudio, this enables us, for one thing, to really easily reuse definitions of objects. So if we've got a customer object defined at my enterprise logical model layer, and I want to reuse that in a new model that I'm developing, or I want to add it into existing systems that we're working with, having this concept of an enterprise-wide logical model which tries to define things that are common across the organization can really help us with that. And then as we move further up, as it were, we can abstract that a bit further into the idea of a conceptual model, which has a much higher viewpoint, the view from 10,000 feet, shall we say, and also link it into the concepts associated with business glossaries, where we're really trying to tie together what something means to the business in terms of a business definition back into maybe the more technical aspects of the data model itself. Okay. And another key thing here really is some of those elements that I was just talking about. But if we look at how we do data modeling and what actually happens and how it occurs, it is a very iterative process. Again, we won't go through this slide kind of step by step, but in essence, it involves understanding some requirements which may be driven from the business. We're then going to look at how we can model those at a logical layer, probably. That might then be something that's quite iterative. So it's kind of going backwards and forwards, requirements, update the model, requirements, update the model. Okay, I think we're good now. We're now going to go ahead and kind of generate a physical model to represent the main elements from the logical model. And potentially we're then going to deploy that out into our environment using SQL code or JSON code. But again, all of these elements can be iterative. And in fact, the whole thing itself can be an iteration, because once we've deployed something out here, of course, requirements may change, they may be updated, and we may need to come back, update our requirements, update our logical model, update our physical model. And again, feeding in elements from a corporate-wide enterprise logical model can really help us with the reusable aspects of that. And ERStudio's got some great capabilities like compare and merge, which really help us around these things. But they're topics for another day, shall we say. So let's dive into a few more of the details now and have a look at things that we can do with the ERStudio user interface to start with. We're going to drop into the product itself in just a moment, but I think I just wanted to bring up a few screenshots to talk a little bit about it first. ERStudio as a product has been around for quite a considerable length of time, so it has got masses of functionality built into it, some of which is sometimes buried a little bit and not always obvious where to find it. And I think our product director and product managers will say if we were rebuilding this again, we'd maybe do it a little bit differently, but we have to work with the kind of underlying principles of what we have now. But it's immensely capable, immensely powerful, and there's some little things that we can kind of highlight here that will just help us to get the best use of it. So we're going to take a look at the UI itself in a moment. We're going to take a look at some specific topics within that, such as the quick access toolbar, and also some specific properties that we can set as well. So let me just drop out of here, and we should be able to make this full screen. Okay. So this is ERStudio Data Architect. I've loaded in one of the sample data models that we supply, and I quite like to use this one, which is called AdventureWorks. I think it's one of the kind of standard ones that's been around with SQL Server for a long time. But within our samples folder, it's been populated with a lot of information as well, so it shows us quite a few things. First thing I'm just going to mention is obviously we've got the ER diagram itself here, with kind of various objects being represented in relationships. But on the left, we also have this hierarchy or explorer view. And I just want to spend just a moment on this, because it's sometimes overlooked a little bit. ERStudio has the concepts of logical models, and we can have what we call submodels within that. So it's just breaking those down into more manageable pieces on the model itself. This one's also got a couple of physical models in there as well. Again, we'll not drill into that too much. But what you will see is that within the navigation kind of bar, it's very easy to kind of highlight and expand things like the entities, the number of attributes we have, views, relationships, all that sort of good stuff. And what's not always obvious is, if we're looking at a model here and we're trying to find particular entities or particular things on the model, we can actually just click them and it will highlight that for us. So these things do work together. I can actually do multiple selections as well. So I can select things multiply, highlight them all, and work with them in that regard. So don't just dismiss the hierarchy as just a thing that we view to see the overall kind of structure of the model. It is kind of interactive. It does work and interact directly with the model that we're looking at as well. Now, within here also, I think the other thing that it's worth pointing out is the default, I guess, with a lot of these tools is to just pick up the mouse and start moving things around. And we can do obviously lots of things with that. You know, if we just have a quick look at the top here, we've got things like pan capability. So I select that, I can drag it around the screen to where I want it. But there's also a lot of keyboard shortcuts in ERStudio. So if I want to zoom in a bit more, we just press the plus button. Zoom out, we press the minus button. Move things up or down a little bit, use the cursor keys. So we don't always have to be kind of grabbing the mouse and clicking on things as we're entering, moving things around. I have a link in a little bit which shows you a list of the main keyboard shortcuts that can be useful in there. The other thing that's kind of available, which people often, again, overlook or don't utilize, but can be really useful, is within the tools menu, there's these things here called an overview window and a zoom window. Now I'm going to take this up to my main model. The main model in ERStudio is where everything exists, and the submodels show us a subset of those. So my main model, even in my simple example here, is pretty busy. There's quite a lot going on, but we can utilize things like this overview window. I can make that, should have made that a little bit bigger earlier. And this allows us to kind of pick up and navigate around different areas of it if we know what we're specifically looking for. And alongside that, there's also a concept of a zoom window, which can be a little bit more useful as well. So as we're navigating around the diagram, you know, if the diagram we've zoomed right out because we want to be able to see the bigger picture, as we navigate around it, then we're going to see the zoom in and the zoom window. These can actually go outside of the ERStudio window. So if you've got a very large screen or multiple monitors, you can drag them off there. So again, it's just little things like that can make your kind of navigation around the model itself a little bit easier. And as I said, on the diagram itself, there's lots of little things we can do here around alignments and all sorts of other stuff. Oh, one other thing that's quite interesting. Again, if you've got a large model with multiple kind of objects on here, and we're looking at vendor maybe, we've got this little thing here called Navigate Relationships, which we can select. And if I click a relationship line like this one, I might wonder where that's going to end up. What's the other part of the relationship? And it'll just take us down there. Okay. So again, lots and lots of little kind of things that we can work with on the model itself. Now, if we look towards the top here, we obviously have a standard kind of Windows ribbon bar type environment, which is nice. It's good. It groups things together. So anything that's related to the diagram, which is this kind of the diagram on screen I'm looking at, this is kind of here. There's a little find entity and view options available to us. I can do the zooming that we just saw. Anything that's related to the model itself. So the model could consist of a logical and multiple physical models. So here you can see we can add new models, generate new physical models. So this is kind of working at a slightly higher level. Insert groups things together, like, oh, we want to drop a new entity in there, you want to add new relationships, and so on. So that's all good stuff. But it does mean sometimes that we have to navigate around a little bit to find something. For example, one of the things that I use quite a lot on the zoom functionality is, you know, if I'm over here looking at the overall model, I'd like to zoom in a bit more, but it's a big model, plus minus keys will help. But otherwise, I've got to kind of click over here, click down there. I don't want to zoom it there. Actually, I like the interactive zoom, so let's do that. And then I can use my mouse scroll wheel to kind of go up and down. But that's several clicks involved there. So we do have this thing here called the quick access toolbar. And the nice thing with this is it's completely configurable. So any of the things that I use frequently, I can add on to the quick access toolbar, and they're then available directly for me to use. So I've got some on mine. I've got, like, I want to create a new data model. I've got undo, redo, reverse engineering, and I've also got that zoom button. So if I just click that there, then immediately I'm kind of into the zoom functionality that I was looking for earlier. And if you just click the little drop down on the end there, you'll see a whole list of different commands that we can add into it. So this is my quick access toolbar on the right. You can see we can add little separators between them, so they're not all just a big row of icons. You can separate them off into groups, and you can kind of pick and choose from anything really that's available through all the detailed menus in the alignment bar. So that's something I find that a lot of people just don't use, but it does really have a big impact just on being able to directly click and start using things within the toolset itself. Another thing as well when we're working with objects is obviously ERStudio supports things like context menus. So what we actually see here on the screen, if I right click, that will change a little bit depending on where I am. So again, I could select one of those and the context menu changes a little bit. So it highlights the things that are relevant to me. Now, it's also got some pretty neat functionality. So if I think these two should work actually, I grab those two objects. And again, you'll see as I highlight them here, it's kind of highlighting them on the left again. So it's, it's still that interactive thing. And if I go, let's go ahead and I can create lots of things, but hey, I want to create a view. And let's OK to that, that's fine. Oh, we got that there. I'll just get a little alias there. There. So what it's done there is from those two entities that I selected, I just click create a view for me, and it's created the view. And we can load that up into the view editor. So we've got kind of details of the entities. So this is everything that's available. I'm just using those two entities that I selected, product vendor, vendor contact, any specific attributes, is there any where clauses, is it grouped by, and have a look at the DDL itself as well that's being generated in there. So again, lots of little things that kind of are semi-wizard driven, and with just a few clicks, ERStudio will do a lot of that work for us. And the other thing I just want to highlight here as well, which is a really powerful kind of set of options we have. There's all sorts of defaults you can set and change. We can access it on the context menu, diagram object display items, or it's also on the diagram ribbon bar here as well. That's fine. This allows us to control lots and lots of information about what we actually see on the data model. You can also choose the different orderings. So I've got logical attribute ordering here for my entities. I could actually say all I want to see is just the definition. So if I OK that, it hides away all the details and just gives me just the definitions in there. But there's loads of stuff that we can use here, and this can be useful because it's applicable to each individual submodel. So each of these little submodels, these layers on the model itself, can have a different set of parameters specified here. So I might have one that's very detailed, showing all of my attributes, showing owner information, table names, etc. Loads and loads of technical information. Or I could have some others which are just showing us more of a conceptual view of just the description and definition of what it actually is. Okay. Now, talking about reuse, the other thing I'm just going to point out here, and we'll use this in just a moment, but again, this is something that can be easily overlooked, and people often say, oh, how can I reuse things? And you can copy and paste them, by the way. If you look at the menu options here, there's kind of copy, we can copy it, we can paste it and kind of reuse it that way. But a much more powerful way is if we look at the tab called Data Dictionary. I'm just going to scroll down because I'm going to look at one particular element here. ERStudio has something called domains. Okay, and a domain is basically a reusable attribute. And I've got a whole set defined here. So I've got standard definitions for things like address information. What's a postal code stored as, and all sorts of other information there. Now, I can share those across data models, and if I'm using the version of ERStudio like Enterprise with the repository, I can have a centralized enterprise data dictionary, which is reused by all my data models. And what that means is if I change the definitions, they can be pushed out to all the models. So I just want to highlight it in this one because we're going to use some of this in just a second. And I'll come back to that as we go through. Okay. So that was a quick kind of tour of the UI side of things. Let's just pick up where we left off here, and we'll crack on through the slides fairly quickly now. So the next bit I want to use and talk about is how we work with JSON and JSON structures, and we'll use some of those little shortcuts and other things within there that I've just talked about as well. So obviously, I think most people will be aware JSON is a textual format which is used to describe arrays of objects and fields. Typically, it's hierarchical. So you can see here, we'll use this kind of example in my demo in a moment. We've got a book. The book's got chapters. The chapters got sections, and so on. What we've also found now as well is that some databases actually support what they call complex or embedded JSON columns. So you can actually have a structure that's defined in JSON that's actually held within just a column within the database. And we'll look at that in a moment and explain why that's, at the same time as being really useful and powerful, can also be a little bit dangerous, shall we say, and we need to keep an eye on that. Right, I'm going to go through the next few really quickly. We'll see this in the demo, but just to really explain it, the way we implement things within ERStudio is we have the concept of this logical model, and the logical model is abstracted away from the platform itself. So really that doesn't change regardless in terms of what it provides, whether we're on Snowflake or SQL Server or Oracle, or whether we're on a JSON document-based format. That always pretty much looks the same. Now, if we're working with a SQL database, we're probably going to get a diagram that looks a bit like this. We're using, typically people use crow's feet type notation and things of that nature. So we've got relationships defined. ERStudio also supports another way of organizing things at the physical layer with what we call containment relationships. So this looks a little bit different. And this is something that that NoSQL implementations like Mongo use quite extensively, and we also utilize it in the way in which we work with JSON files as well. But again, logical model, not really any different. Physical, starting to look a bit different because we're dealing with kind of containment relationships. We'll also see these being used as well with things like Google BigQuery, where it supports arrays of objects. The latest versions of SQL Server do as well. Snowflake also. So we'll see this concept of a containment relationship where we're saying a chapter contains sections and the chapters themselves are contained by the book. And then finally, we might actually end up with a physical data model that looks something like this. Because if it's a JSON document that we're looking to output, then in essence, sorry, let me just jump back again. In essence, what we're going to end up with here is the same logical representation, but this time it's just a hierarchical kind of document based on what we're going to be expecting to be generated in the JSON structures. Okay, so let's drop out again. I'm just going to go straight across here, and I'm going to split the demo into two little discrete parts. The first one I'll do really quickly. It's important, but it's quite an easy one to show. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reverse engineer. So I could do that. I could go and create a new model, we could say. I'm going to do that by reverse engineering the database. I've got SQL Server running in my local VMware instance, and I'm just going to use that. And I'm just going to manually fill in some of this information here. It's SQL Server, yeah, that's all good. Which database I want to reverse engineer from? I'm going to do this little one here. Okay, I'm not worried about everything else. I'm just going to take the tables. Oh, and there's only two tables anyway. So that's nice and easy. Let's have a look at what's defined in there. And I'm just going to turn off a couple of these things actually. I'll come back to some of these options in just a moment and explain what they do. But I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah, go reverse engineer those two tables for me. It's not going to be that exciting. It's just two tables. But there we go. We've got our sales order and we've got our product, and we're probably looking at this thinking, yeah, that's all okay. There's nothing really that we need to get concerned about in here. Sales order itself. It's just got a number, a date, customer identifier. It's got some order data. I guess that's just telling us any requests or notes about what we're doing. But hang on, that's quite a big. That's data types, 4,000 kind of characters in size. That's kind of a little bit piquing my curiosity as to what's actually being handled in there. Now, I could jump across to the database itself. In fact, we could do that really quickly. And I could query it. So I've just done a select star from sales order. So this is just a SQL query tool, by the way. This is not ERStudio. And if we run that query, we get these results. Wow, that order data's got loads of stuff in there. Hang on, it's also got some stuff in there like password and CVC code and credit card numbers. Okay, that's not really very apparent when we just kind of reverse engineer this from ERStudio, is it? So let's just do that again and look at the options that are available. So I'm going to do that reverse engineering. And we're just going to say connect to it again, select the same database. Yeah, that's all good, all the same so far. But I'm now going to say, actually, let's do a little bit of more investigation here. So if you have data sources that you suspect or think may have got embedded JSON fields in there, you can enable this, and you can ask it to parse a couple of different records if you like. I've got mine set to 5, so it'll just kind of work its way through to make sure they're all the same structure. And okay, let's give that a go, because this is quite a new feature we added quite recently. So I'm going to say, yeah, okay, let's do that this time. Okay. So now it's split things out for us. It's basically saying that sales order. Let's move it around a bit manually here. Actually, I could apply a layout, I guess. Be lazy. So that's one thing that gets me. You can apply partial layouts, by the way, just in case you weren't aware. So I can just kind of have different parts of the diagram laid out at a time. Let's just see what that one looks like. That's not really very exciting, is it? But it'll do us for now. My sales order, it's actually now broken out that order data, and it's identified that in that JSON embedded field, there's address, CVC code, credit card number, all this other stuff that potentially could be private information. So we'd want to be aware of that for our data governance. We maybe want to apply tags and kind of what we call attachments to that, to basically say, this is confidential info that we're using here. There's constraints about how it can be used, etc., etc. So that ability to actually analyze and extract the embedded JSON structures, as I said, that's something we added quite recently, is really, really powerful in ERStudio. So that's definitely worth a look if you haven't seen that one already. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, other things we can do with JSON. Let's kind of think about it the other way now. We've kind of imported some embedded JSON, but this time I'm going to do the same thing again. Actually, I'm going to use the reverse engineering. This time I'm going to reverse engineer a slightly larger set of tables. So just excuse me 1 second. I've just got a bit of a cough in my throat here. Okay, try again. Now, on the wizards in ERStudio, like here we're in the reverse engineering wizard, there's this little setting at the bottom which appears on pretty much all of them. And it says quick launch, which doesn't sound particularly exciting, but let's click on it. What quick launch actually allows you to do is save away the settings that you've configured for this reverse engineering in this case. So if I say, let's bring that one back, it's filled in my password, it's filled in my default database, it's selected that I want just the tables. It's also selected that actually I don't want to include that object address, I just want those ones. So it's bringing back all the information and configuration items that I specified and kind of recalling them back into the wizard for me. And I'll leave those on. I don't think there's embedded JSON here, it doesn't matter. And when we get to the end here, if you change the settings, you can just do a save as. They get saved out to a folder on the local file system, but they can be shared with other users very easily by copying to a network share or other things. So if I go, yeah, let's go ahead and do that, and say OK. Right, so we've reverse engineered from SQL Server. This time I am going to apply a layout because it looks a little bit nicer. So I've got my logical model, that's all great. We've got those 6 entities in there. I've also got a physical model. And again, that's going to look very, very similar. Let's apply a layout to it. It says it's SQL Server at the bottom of the screen there. So that's all quite cool, quite nice. It's brought all that information in for us. Now, how about if we actually want to look at, could we take this information and from this data model, look at how we could structure it into a JSON message or a JSON document? Yeah, we could do that. So let's take the logical model. And again, there's different ways of getting to this from the menus, but I typically use the context menu here. I'm going to say, let's generate a physical model from my logical. And I always give it bad names. I'm just going to call it phys-lib, because it's going to be related to a library. It's got libraries and books in there. It's going to be on the JSON platform. You'll see there's all sorts of other choices we can make here. The rest of it, I'm just going to take the defaults and say go. Right, so now just at the bottom of the screen there, saying that this is now a JSON physical model. You'll see it's got these, it has got relationships, but they're not really relationships. They've got this little kind of red stop symbol because it's basically saying I pulled these in because from the logical model I can see these things are somewhat related, but JSON doesn't have the concept of relationships in the same way. So what I could now start to do is maybe look at building it up a little bit. So if I'm going to work with it, I'm going to just quickly highlight those bits. I'm going to say let's create a new submodel. That's why SBook for the book submodel. So that's now got just my 3 items in the layering in there. So submodel is really powerful, really nice to kind of break down the model. I'm just going to check my display options here to make sure it's got my default set, because with JSON, it's a good idea to have this little box here called rollup contained object set. And I'll explain why in a second. So I'm now going to work with it a little bit. And I'm going to say, I'm going to set up some containment relationships here. And I can basically follow what I have here. So chapters have sections in them. So I'm just going to contain those in there. Ooh, that's quite nice. And the same for books and chapters. So it's now representing this physical model for JSON with kind of just a single object, but you'll see there it's hierarchical. So I can expand and compact these things. If I look at it, I can look at the properties just like anything else. So there's all my kind of items that are making it up. You'll see there where it's got a hierarchy. So the book contains chapter, saying that's an object. So I can click the link and enter that one. But instead of showing things like SQL code, it's now aware that this is the JSON platform. So we've got JSON sitting behind the model. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to do actually within here, probably, one thing just to point out, if I go back to my main model now, maybe just pull that out there. You'll see it's grouped those together and brought us back into the main model display now as well, as we set up those containment relationships. And I could work through the other ones as well. What I'm thinking though is maybe we'll need to add some additional information. So I'm going to create a couple of new what are called nested objects, and I'll call those, what should we call them? We'll call it a borrower. So someone who borrows a book from the library. And maybe we'll have another one. Oh, that's going to be, didn't want to do that. So you can be too quick with what you're doing sometimes. Just going to remove that and remove that, otherwise it'll get a bit confusing. I'm just going to do that again. So I'm just going to drop down the nested object. Actually, I'm going to drop down 2. That's okay. We'll work with that. That's fine. So doing it again. Right, so we've got some embedded objects in there. The other thing I want to show you really quickly, and I'm conscious of the time here as well, actually. If you remember back to that first model that we looked at, we had these like concepts of things called domains, where they were like reusable attributes. So this is a new model, so it doesn't have any of those defined in here. If I was using the ERStudio Enterprise with repository, I could just point it to my repository and it would pull them in for me. In my case, it's a standalone model, so I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to say, I've got some domains here for address, money, and person. I'm going to copy all those. There's my new model. Okay, so just to be clear there, what we've done is we've basically just copied and pasted some reusable attribute definitions across. And what I can then do is things like I can say, well, they're not very meaningful names, but let's populate this one with maybe some address data. So maybe we want apartment, city, country, postcode, street address. We can drop that in under object 6. So it's defining all those for us now. I could also then maybe say the person's got to have a name. Just maybe leave it at that, and maybe make that more of a top level one. So we're building it up that way. And again, if I have a look inside here, what it's basically done is it's populated all those fields with predefined data types for me and added them in there. Okay, so data dictionary and domains, great for using attributes. So we've done some work on it now. We've kind of tidied it up a bit. Actually, can I quickly change that one? Let's just change that to a slightly more meaningful name. We'll call that a borrower, because we want to keep track of their name and address when they borrow books from us and so on. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just go back to my little submodel here for the book. Okay. What I'd quite like to do now is start to look at how we can generate some code from these models. So this is a JSON instance. So can we actually generate some JSON code from it? Yes, of course we can. But the other thing I'm just going to tie that into as well, really quickly, is ERStudio does support the direct publishing from your data model for things like SQL code and JSON code out to Git platforms. So we can work with GitHub, GitLab, Atlassian, Azure, and Assembler. And again, we'll look at this in the product, but we just need to do some little basic configuration pointing to the repository. And then a lot of the wizards where we're generating scripts and so on, we'll have this option to generate a file out to Git. So let's see if we can do that. So if I look at my tools menu, you'll see here I've got a little Git options. I've already populated mine from earlier, so it's pointing to my GitHub with my login and folder structure with my username and my personal access token. I also give it a little a folder on disk where it basically caches and kind of clones what's in the GitHub environment. I probably want to do a little test. That's great. And we'll just make sure we're kind of up to date there with what we've got. Now, I could have a quick look at my GitHub environment here. And you'll see there I've got nothing terribly exciting. I've got a JSON file from a little bit earlier, so that was kind of 6 hours ago, and then one about an hour before we started when I was just testing a couple of things quickly. So let's go ahead and say I want to generate, it says generate database, it really means generate the code. So let's say generate script file to Git. We'll go to the main branch. It's going to go in here, and I'm going to commit this message saying webinar deploy. I'll just put a #1 on the end, so that's the first one we're doing. So it's already ticked that box for me. There are a few options that we can specify. I'm just going to take this JSON instance. We can do a quick preview, so you can see what it's going to look like. But if I just go through the wizard and say finish, it's now gone ahead. And if I jump back to my GitHub environment and just do a quick refresh, there's one that I just put up there called fizz-lib that we called it earlier. And we can click in this, obviously, and we'll see the code behind it that's been published up there. So other members in the team could now come in and look at this with a view to kind of taking that, deploying it into our other systems that maybe require things fed in as JSON messages or JSON documents. And I could go in at a higher level as well now, and we'll do that really quickly. I could actually say, let's do a, apologies for the names of some of these. I'll just bring all of those in there, so our borrower is now part of the book with the objects in there and so on. We probably should have done that the other way around actually, but in fact let's do that. Let's do borrower has books. Okay, that maybe makes a bit more sense. And then I could go ahead and say let's generate that one, generate it, connect. And maybe I don't want all the others, maybe I just want the borrower one, because that's the one that we're updating. Is that right? Yeah. And next, and again, I can do the preview. It's got more information in there now. But if we finish that, do I want to go ahead and save to my local copy? Yes. And the final little look here is if we just refresh that again and go up, you'll see there it says redeployed it. And if I look at the source code now, we're seeing the updated source script behind it, and we should be able to see things like the history being maintained by the GitHub repository just as normal. But the idea is it just makes the workflow a little bit quicker and nicer in that as we're going from the model out to deployment to sharing it with our ops teams and so on, it goes centrally to the GitHub repositories where they can pick it up from. Okay, we've literally got a few minutes and then we'll leave just a couple of minutes at the end. So the other thing actually that I was going to show a little bit on, I will do this really quickly actually. If we have a look here. Right, I'm just going to have to this is slightly annoying. Bear with me 1 second. I really apologize. I'm just going to have to stop sharing my screen for 1 second because it won't let me toggle and find the menus for VMware. All right. Sorry, I think GoToWebinar kind of decided it was going to take control and not let my VMware sessions pop up and change the screen for me. Okay. So, final thing, just for 2 minutes, is just to show you a little bit on what we can also do in terms of publishing the models themselves out to a wider audience. So we kind of talked about publishing the code, as in JSON code or SQL code, but what about deploying the actual models themselves? So I'm running just a web browser here, and I've configured and set up what's called our team server repository. I've published the models that I'm interested in. So we've got things like this is one of our book examples, similar to what we were working on before. And that's all looking good. So we could maybe say, let's have a look at the model itself. So this is all generated directly from the data model. And it runs its own kind of process within the web portal environment. So once you say, check the box, publish this one, you don't need to do anything more about it. We often get people saying, can I copy it to Confluence? Can I export the whole thing out to some other formats? We can add it into our own intranet. There's ways you can do some of that, but the team server makes it all very, very seamless because there's my model, it's been generated, it's read-only, I can't change it, but I can zoom in. And I can also do things, it's nice and live, so I can click on things. And it will show me the details from it. So that's my entity from my logical model with all my attributes behind it and so on. It can also support things like kind of related business terms and how we work with those. But again, that's probably a bigger topic in its own right. But in terms of publishing information out to make it accessible to other users in the organization, really easy to do that with the team server web portal. You can also collaborate a little bit. So if there's things you're interested in, you can say, I want to follow that. And then notifications can be set up to email you or let you know in your kind of feed stream to say, oh, while you're away, John has updated the book entity. You might want to take a look. Or if you're interested in particular models, you can register interests with all the different models and it'll notify you on those as well. But really nice thing is that you get full access to the images. It's kind of like then a self-service approach. And it's got a really nice search engine. So literally I can just start typing something in, like we were working with a library as well, weren't we? So we'll start typing library. Okay, there's an entity from our book example model for library. Let's click on that. That's going to bring that up for us with all the attributes. So it makes it really easy to either navigate through the models or to even say, I'm not sure of the model structure, but I know I'm interested in where we're storing information about books and libraries or about employees and sales commissions or whatever else it may be. Okay. So I'm just going to bring this up again and I'm just going to pop that up there. Finishing. So this was kind of the walkthrough that we went through. We took a look at the whole kind of UI side of things. We looked at kind of working with JSON as a platform, which is something I think ERStudio does really, really well. A nice way of just publishing it out to the Git, and then how we can actually also make it available and share it. So what we try to do, as I said, is really say, we've got here a workflow which allows us to be productive in the way we're working with the models, reverse engineering, reusing settings, customizing the menus, allow us to work on the models themselves, and then publish it out and share it with others as well. There is a load of good resources out there. That's the main resource center on our ERStudio.com webpage. keep taking a look on there because new webinars come up. You can also download kind of previous ones and the whole kind of list of the documentations online, along with those keyboard command shortcuts I mentioned. If you haven't checked it out, we recently did a webinar with Bill Inman, with our product director Jamie, where they had a discussion which covered a lot of things around why modeling is still very important. What does it mean when we're working with data warehouses or data lakes or data lakehouses, and also the impact things like AI have on modeling as well. So that was, I sat and watched that one myself, and it was really interesting to hear the views and all that from Bill Inman as well. I'm going to leave that on the screen for a few seconds, and I'm just going to see if I can put back to those at the same time. So I was just scanning the questions. I think my colleagues have been very very prudent in answering pretty much all of those, which is just as well, as we are coming up close to time there. Can we? Yeah, so there's one question at the end there, I think that just came in. I showed it in Team Server. There might be an answer there, but yes, you can export the models out to rich text formats, to just straight HTML files on disk. Of course, the downside is you have to manage those yourselves then and update them and share them out manually to people and so on. Okay. So I think with that, we're pretty much coming up right on time. If there was anything else that you think of or wanted to ask us, say the QR code's there, or you can go to our website and do the contact. It says contact sales, it gets a flag that it's come from the webinar, and the sales folks will forward that on if it's a technical question, and we'll try and make sure we address those for you as well. So with that, we'll end the session. As I said, it was recorded, so you'll get a link sent out to the recording. I hope some of the points that we covered were useful, and that you'll maybe be able to make use of some of those in your usage of ERStudio. Thanks very much, everyone.